This is a problem that I think has such far-reaching impacts on company culture in general. When teams aren't willing to invest in the talent that finds talent, there is such a ripple effect. And I don't think that enough companies are aware of that. The burnout that it causes, the lack of alignment with company vision and culture, it's a big can of worms that a lot of companies are dealing with the after effects of right now.
Initiating becoming a hiring machine sequence in 3, 2, 1.
Hey everyone, it's Sam Keenley, and welcome back to Becoming a Hiring Machine. This is the show dedicated to fixing recruitment by going beyond saying what needs to change and instead teaches you how to make that change. Today we've got a great trending topics episode ahead of us, but before we get into that, I just want to tell you a little bit about the show. Essentially, we've got shows within the show here. Some days we have interviews with industry thought leaders and others who are shaking up the space, while other days we cover things like trending topics. Every Tuesday, stop by for a Tactical Tuesday episode where we go deep on how to do something that's going to help you drive better results in your day-to-day. Some days we open it up for Q&A. Listeners can drop in questions that they'd to hear us take on, so send those to us at podcast@loxo.co. And occasionally, Matt joins us for a mic drop episode where he shares something that he's been thinking about within the recruitment space and wants you to know. All right, today's trending topic, the realities of hiring today, plus transferable skills, plus finding Bigfoot. 3 wildly different topics, but they're actually a lot more related than you think. And so today, Lex is back to unpack these trending topics, so to speak, and what I'm sure is going to be a pretty fun conversation for us. So Lex, welcome back.
Thank you. That sounds like a Mad Lib.
Yeah, a little. I miss those. Man, I do miss those. Those would be so much fun to get back into.
B2B and recruiting Mad Libs. That's like an untapped market that maybe we should all be thinking about a little bit more strategically.
You heard it here first. Actually might be the most genius next outreach campaign for recruiters. Just like insert adjective, insert this. I mean, I'm not throwing shade, but like it could be better than some of the stuff that we see. So
100%.
Hey, if any recruiters are out there want to give this a shot, we will totally do this and give you all the promotion you want with it.
Exactly, 100%. Hey, look, we're like 1 minute into the episode and already dropping some real tactical stuff for you.
We're done. That's the episode. Thank you all for tuning in.
That's it, guys. Okay, so no, I actually feel like really excited about talking about the real things that we're going to get into today. Hopefully, at this point, anyone who's listening to this episode has also seen Loxo's Finding Bigfoot ads. These are some ads that we've rolled out across multiple platforms. You might have seen them on your TV. You might have seen them in your LinkedIn feed. You might have seen them when you're catching up on The Traders, which is a fantastic reality TV show that I myself am currently watching. We basically put these ads out into the universe to touch on the core pain point that we view recruiters as having, which is really trying to source and contact even the most hard to find candidates. And who better to represent the most difficult, elusive candidate ever than Bigfoot and an alien named Galaxar Neuraxis. I don't think I can even properly pronounce his last name, but it's in some weird alien tongue. So I think I won't be held accountable to that. But basically the idea here was to kind of have a tongue-in-cheek way of exemplifying the concept of a really elusive candidate and being able to make contact even with them. And so hopefully if you've seen these ads, you liked them, you felt seen by them, and you laughed, because what's more important than that at the end of the day? But I think that, obviously this is a recruiting podcast, but for a little bit of the marketing ideology behind this, I think it touches on something that's relevant to any role, which is, okay, you can have a great idea, but there has to be intentionality and there has to be meaning behind it. And so, yes, we had a fun idea of wanting to play around with some fun characters and bring those into the brand and find a way to like infuse a little bit of liveliness and character into things. But it has to be backed in this idea of, okay, what is our core pain point and who are we trying to address and make them feel known and seen? And so all of that to say, I think that there's a little bit of a practical takeaway in that as well for recruiters of, hey, you need to know who you're talking to and be able to speak in their language and get in front of them in the places that, they're going to be hanging out and spending their time. So all of that to say, Bigfoot. Bigfoot is a metaphor, but what does he mean for recruiters? I'd love your take on this and kind of like, what is a Bigfoot candidate?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like you said, it's just that really hard to find candidate. I know a lot of recruiters refer to it as the purple squirrel, where it's you have this hiring manager organization that tells you exactly what they want, and you're just like, cool, but that person doesn't exist. So this is where we had a lot of fun with the campaign because you have these two characters in it. You have one guy in it that I think he looks like the burglar from the first Home Alone, and he cracks me
Yeah.
up with his facial expressions. He's got like the binoculars searching for this like Bigfoot character, and then you've got his wife sitting next to him on her laptop. She's like, I've got Bigfoot pulled up in Loxo right here. Like I can contact him. And then the next commercial, like you see her on a Zoom interview with him, like showing just how easy it is. So yeah, the concept is like I know those purple squirrels, those Bigfoots, those aliens are hard to find, but often it's just because you either don't have access to the data, you don't have access to accurate data, enough data, the right data. And when you have all of those in a really easy to use, easy to find place, and it also that mirrors like the workflow that you want. I need to find someone, I need to contact them, I need to get them in front of the hiring manager. You can do that all in one place. It's like, oh yeah, I found him, here's his contact information, like let me shoot him a quick message and see if he wants to jump on a call. Like doing that all so seamlessly and easy, like that's where we had fun with it, because you have like this old like I'll never be able to find Bigfoot, and then it's like, oh wait, with the right tool I can actually do that. So that's where it was really really fun for us, where like finding that Bigfoot, I think it's like when you're equipped with the right tools, the right data, it makes things so much easier. But that's the first part of it, is just making sure you know like where and how to look. And I think that's something that, again, we don't want to fully pitch Loxo on this, but when you have something that can like, how do you find them based on whatever, job history, skills, whatever it is that you want to get into, if you have that and you know what to put in there pretty easily, like you can find those people. But having that's the first step in it all.
Totally. And I think from a philosophical standpoint, there also becomes the question, and we've talked about this before in previous trending topics episodes, but kind of identifying and almost determining what an A player or a Bigfoot candidate would look like. And I think a lot of times people have this idea in their head, and that's almost part of what makes this type of candidate so elusive is we can't really even pin down what exactly we're looking for ourselves. And so finding and recognizing that candidate when they're right in front of you can be difficult just on that level as well. And so I think that even before getting into the methodology and the technology, there's almost the philosophy of it of, okay, what does our ideal candidate look like from a role perspective, and then also just from like a company culture fit perspective? Like we're always going to hire these types of people, and then for these types of roles we also need to drill down and say we're going to hire this type of person with X, Y, and Z skills. I think that having that really solid and knowing that kind of fine tunes that instinct of just kind of, having a conversation with someone and feeling that, okay, this is the person I'm looking for. And when you have that, you're able to advocate for a candidate in certain ways that you might not have if you didn't have that kind of cultivated gut instinct. So I think that there's like a couple of questions that you can ask yourself when trying to determine like what does this candidate look like, or what does an A player, a Bigfoot, whatever we want to call it, a purple squirrel. And I think you kind of have to figure out that balance between, marketers are always talking about quantitative versus qualitative insights. Same goes for candidates. What is that blend of hard skills and soft skills that we need for someone in this seat? And trying to figure out what that balance looks like, identifying like in certain roles, what are we going to need to invest in this person from a time perspective in terms of ramping them up and getting them into the position that we want them to be in, that kind of thing. So I think philosophically, there's a couple of questions that hiring teams, companies, recruiters need to kind of align on in order to be able to, one, find the Bigfoot, but also like be able to identify them as Bigfoots when they see them.
I love that. And that's, yeah, as you say, it's like the skills, the growth mindset, factoring in the hiring organization as part of it. And this is where I know we're not really talking about AI in this conversation, but it's another trending topic.
Yeah.
Like, is AI going to
It's
replace our
always
job? I
in.
mean, every industry, right? And so this is where I actually say like it's going to enhance, but also it can't replace. So where it's going to enhance is, you have tools that can take into account like you're a hiring organization, you work in the medical industry, we're going to surface people who have those skills that also have experience in that, because we know that the learning curve is less steep for them sometimes. But so it's going to pull on those, you put in the different skills. But where AI will never be able to replace recruiters is you still have to have an eye on going through those, because you could have, this is where a lot of people like the growth mindset, put it on a resume. I'm a go-getter, I've got a growth mindset. But it's like, yeah, how can you validate that? You really can't. And most people this is where the recruiter comes in, because they can look at 10, 100,000, 10,000 resumes, and they can look at someone, and the biggest distinguishing factor that you often see that AI could never pick up on is this person a job hopper, or is this person growing steadily every year, every 2 years, because they're learning, they're taking on more responsibility. So when you see those changes, AI just sees it as like, oh, this person's changing jobs every 1 2 years. But you have that context of being able to understand, like, well, what kind of change is it? Is it a lateral? Is it a constant? Is it, seeming just kind of like popping around? Or is it, oh, I see what trajectory they're taking with their career, and going up that. So that's where it's like you have the ability to identify them based on the hard skills, the hard things that you can plug in, but you still need to have that eye to really figure out like that growth mindset side of it.
100%. And then I feel like, even when you get into actually having a conversation with these candidates, yes, anyone can say they have a growth mindset. I would bet that 9 out of 10 people have something alluding to that in their resume at some point or another. But it's really easy to tell once you start actually talking to someone. It's really easy to validate that, I think, and have conversations that give you the context and the information that you need to understand, okay, is this person really a go-getter? Do they really have a growth mindset, or are they just saying that they do? And I think that fine-tuning that instinct and kind of being able to determine in every single role, a growth mindset might look a little bit different, and the requirements for success in the role are going to be very different. And there is that blend of skills while also having just, the personality and the temperament for a certain role and for a certain company. We've gotten into this before, but I think AI will never be able to fully gauge culture on a sense of, okay, is this person a culture fit? And that's becoming increasingly important. And so being able to kind of lean into that and have that be a differentiator, I think, is really important. But a lot of people are not really great at explaining or articulating their culture. Everybody says, we have a great culture. We have a great, we've got a great team. It's all A players. But when you actually challenge them on that and push on that, it's very difficult for them to articulate what that actually means. And that makes it more difficult for them to identify a star candidate and say, like, this is a person who fits on our team. So I think trying to lean into almost quantifying the qualitative is a good first step when identifying a star candidate, as well as being able to almost make that processize it. I think it's difficult to do that, but it's possible.
And that's why recruiters exist at the end of the day, because people, it's like, oh, I could just slap it up on a job board and you'll get whoever comes through. But yeah, that's where you need someone to be able to find and connect all those dots that, it's applying, like you said, the quantitative to the qualitative. That can only come from time, experience, knowledge, and being able to help read into people, have those conversations to understand what that actually looks like in practice.
100%. It's the psychology of recruitment, which is to me the most interesting part of it all. So, we're going to move into the next phase of our Mad Lib, which directly relates to this entire conversation. And it's just kind of around the realities of hiring today. It's one thing to talk, again, philosophically about, okay, what is a Bigfoot candidate? How do we find these candidates? How do we hire them? How do we engage them? But we're up against some unique challenges in the market right now. Recruiters are facing, unprecedented times and challenges. I think will continue to exist in unprecedented times for as long as the world keeps spinning at this point. But I think acknowledging the realities of the market and being able to really address those head on is important in terms of being able to use that information to guide, okay, does this shift our perspective on what a Bigfoot candidate looks like, and also the ways in which we can expect to show up to them and for them. So Mercer recently released their State of Talent Acquisition report for 2023, which has predictions for 2024. And there's a lot of really, really interesting insights there. It's a really meaty report. I think it's over 500 companies. A lot of this is in-house, but over 500 companies that they kind of surveyed here, and the the insights are honestly mind-blowing in more ways than one. We're going to explore more of this in future episodes because there's a lot that we could bite off here. But for this, I think one of the biggest chunks of information that I found really enlightening was around the idea of skills gaps and hiring teams having really unrealistic expectations for candidates that would be surfacing, and how that has such a negative impact on overall talent initiatives and hiring in general. So, 3 stats that I think are really key here. 1, 65% of companies are experiencing a skills gap. Candidates are lacking the skills that the business views as necessary to succeed in a role. Number two, 63% of companies struggle with managers having impractical expectations. That is insane to me. 63%. The final stat here is 59% of companies said that they are unable to find and attract top talent. That over half of companies surveyed said that they are not able to find and attract top talent. And what is more important than that from a talent acquisition standpoint? So that to me indicates a really big problem and a big challenge that we're facing in 2024 is to address these statistics specifically. What do you think, like when gut reaction, like what is the cause of this? Like how can we unpack this a little bit?
Yeah. Recruiters are like, we're the answer. This is all in house. Like, we can help you with all of that. That's exactly why we exist. I'm just laughing as I was taking notes while you're reading through some of these. I mean, there's so many different things that immediately come to mind. So these are all, I think, baked into core practices that all of our recruiters that are on the agency side do as part of their day to day. They're like, this is exactly why we do it, to get ahead of all of these issues that are coming up. But if you're in house and you don't know this, or whether it's like a junior in house recruiter that's never done it before, or they're just like, oh, we'll just post it up to a job board and see what we can get. But yeah, you have 65% of candidates lack the skills that the business needs. So my first question is like, are they realizing this afterward? Like once they get in the role, like, oh, they don't have the skills, or is it, I think it might be tied to like almost the bottom point, but are they just not able to find the right pool of people? And again, because it's like, are they just waiting for people to come to them and then they're just trying to pick from the best of, that 100, 200, 300 people that went through Easy Apply or wherever it was that came in. So yeah, how do you get ahead of that? And that's one where recruiters just like, hey, this is a job intake form 101. Like we ask all these questions. What do they need? Why do they need it? And really pushing and going deeper and deeper on it. And then that ties exactly in with the organizations face unrealistic expectations, with the 63% of managers having impractical expectations. So again, it's like when you have that first sit down meeting to understand, like, that's a question like, what do you expect of this role? What's the job to be done? What do they need to accomplish? I think a lot of people probably are like, oh, I need a new marketing manager. I need a new finance director. I need a new, insert whatever role here. They just look at it as a seat to fill, and they don't really think through the full, like, what are they going to be doing for 30, 40 hours a week? What do we need them to accomplish? What are their goals? They're sitting very surface level with this. And I think that's why they don't realize, like, what are the skills that they need to be successful? What do I expect from them every day? And then the bottom part, 59% not being able to find and attract top talent. It's like, well, yeah, if you're just slapping us on a board, we all know the story of how that goes there. So recruiters are probably just screaming at the top of their lungs right now, like wanting to they probably are either turning this podcast off, want to stop and pull over at the side of the road, like holding on to their steering wheel, shaking it as hard as they can, or they're about to like throw their iPod out the window. If anyone still uses iPods.
So sorry. Yeah. For any collateral damage related to this podcast, we are not financially responsible, but we grieve with you for any harm that this podcast has caused.
Yeah, but I mean, these are all, you and I just look at this and we're just like, duh, that's the only possible thing. But those are the immediate things that come to mind, is just, it's a lack of expertise in going about the hiring process.
100%. And I think like this goes back to a concept that we've talked about so often just internally. The idea of recruiters being actually talent advisors, strategic partners to hiring teams, especially in-house organizations who culture does matter so much, long-term vision matters so much. There is so much opportunity for recruiters to come in and kind of challenge these preconceived notions and correct some of these statistics head on, in the sense of, okay, you are saying that candidates are lacking the skills that you need necessary, or that the candidates that I'm surfacing aren't a good skills fit. But I think that you might have unrealistic expectations about the type of candidate that you're going to bring on based on the role, the salary, all of these things that we've kind of chatted about before. How do we align earlier on to be able to ensure, okay, the candidates that I, recruiter, am bringing to the table are a good fit, and you can trust that I understand your long-term strategy and vision, and that the candidates that I'm bringing, while they might have a different skill set than you had imagined or envisioned, are a good fit and will provide value. And so I think that, yeah, there's that whole side of things where it's not so much just the, okay, in the moment, how do we fix this problem? How do we, for this job, how do we move the needle a little bit? But instead, it's more, how do we position ourselves as strategic partners who really understand and just get it? So that way, it's not this battle of, okay, well, you just don't understand the type of candidate that we're looking for, or, oh, we need them to have X, Y, and Z. I think that there's a lot of ways that middle statistic, organizations having unrealistic expectations, 63%, that to me is the big clincher. We need to challenge this. We need to push back against that. And I think that recruiters have a really interesting opportunity to be the ones who are kind of advocating, one, for widening your expectations around what an ideal candidate could look like, and two, kind of reframing the concept of making a hire. I think having it seem or feel less transactional and less, hey, we've got, an immediate need and we need to solve this problem, and rather having this long-term approach, I think could go a long way, and establishing relationships on both sides with clients and with candidates. So that's kind of my big takeaway when I read these stats is I think we have a very almost like one-to-one approach right now. And I think widening the lens a little bit and starting to think a little bit more long-term, a little bit more strategically on all parts could be really impactful.
Yeah, I have nothing else to add to that. I mean, it's almost like one of those answers that people don't want to expect, but it's simple. It's right in front of us. It's just doing the work, accepting it, and finding people who are really, really, really good at what they do, and trusting them to do what they're really, really, really good at.
Totally. And I think, again, there's so many factors here. There's so many variables. It's simple, but it's not. It's complicated, but it's not. It's the dichotomies of it all. But I do think that this is another really interesting case for just data and for recruiters having good data in general, like benchmarks as far as certain roles, certain industries, that kind of thing, because this is an opportunity for you to go to these hiring teams and say, listen, I know that you say you want X, Y, and Z, but realistically, based on one, the market right now, two, the pay that you're willing to provide, three, the working conditions, whatever it may be, this is not realistic. This is realistic. And let me show you a path toward bringing this person on and getting them to the place of providing the value that you need within Y time period. So I think that there's a lot of ways that we can start to almost like beef up our almost like opposition handling on some level. This almost gets into like a sales mindset, but hey, how can I sell you on this candidate in a way that really makes you feel confident in this hire, while also understanding that the expectations that you had initially were never really fair or reasonable. So that's kind of another thing that my mind starts spinning with, ways that we could kind of equip recruiters with something in that regard. But I don't know. I find all of this just mind blowing on some level. I can't believe it's 2024. And yeah, over half of companies are just really like genuinely struggling at a baseline of being able to find and attract what they would consider top talent. Like bare bones, that's just wow.
Yeah, and part of me wonders, I know a lot of companies laid off recruiters in-house last year, so it's like, well, are they just having hiring managers do this without even having a real in-house recruiter? And two, with those different budget cuts, a lot of people are probably like, we can't afford to pay an external recruiter, we can't afford to pay an agency recruiter. But like you and I always say, it's like, well, can you afford to make a bad hire? Because if you go and compare the costs of all of that, you don't have realistic expectations. Like, all this tells you, it's like you don't know what you're doing to start with. So that's where it's like, short term, yeah, it's more expensive to pay for a recruiter, but long term, what happens if that next hire doesn't pan out? And then the one after, it's like, when are you finally going to realize like, oh, it actually would have been much more cost effective in terms of the onboarding, also from a revenue perspective for our company? What happens when we don't have someone in that seat, the bad person in the seat? Like, what are we missing, depending on if they're, a support manager, and like, you all of a sudden have customers getting angry and leaving and having bad word of mouth about your company, or it's a sales rep and they just never ramp up. So now you're short all this revenue target that you were supposed to hit on a year that you probably weren't even going to hit it anyway. So
And
yeah,
the productivity losses of having a hiring manager in that seat of hiring and really doing the dirty work of finding this candidate, interviewing, all of this stuff that, they're not being productive in their main 9-to-5 role at that point either. So there's so many losses that we don't look at when we're addressing this issue or when we're thinking about this issue. And I think the more that we can bring awareness to that side of things, the better off everyone will be, because hiring managers don't want to have to be in the weeds of bringing, sourcing, interviewing, all of that stuff. Like it's so complicated, and that's not their skill set. That's not what their job is. And
No.
so I view it as almost just, disrespect to that person in that seat also for companies to expect like, hey, you've got to figure this out. And also you're still beholden to these core metrics that are actually within your scope of work. So
Yeah.
this
It's
is
a
a
recipe
problem
for
that I think has such far reaching impacts on company culture in general. When teams aren't willing to invest in the talent that finds talent, there is such a ripple effect. And I don't think that enough companies are aware of that, the burnout that it causes, the lack of alignment with company vision and culture. I think it's a big can of worms that a lot of companies are dealing with the after effects of right now.
And I'm sure there's people listening to this are like, excuse me, louder for the people in back. Thank you.
Is this thing on?
Yeah. Yeah. So we can just drop that mic. I think that anyone listening is probably just like, yes, thank you. Couldn't agree more. Get this in front of the people that need to hear it.
Yeah, tell us who we need to send this to. We'll drop it in their inbox.
How Bigfoot carried over.
So the next piece, I think that this was another really interesting stat to me, and it ties back to what we're talking about here, and it's around the concept of business alignment. One thing that is encouraging, this number isn't as high as I wish it was, but I think it's grown in the past couple of years for sure because of issues like the one that we're touching on right now. 56% of leaders at the companies that Mercer studied said that talent acquisition is a high priority for their leadership team. And so I think that this is an area where growing that alignment becomes really key, and offering that strategic mindset becomes key, because as leaders are getting more involved in talent acquisition in general, one, there's a couple of more hoops to jump through in terms of really making a case for a candidate. But I think that you also have a little bit more of a leg up when it comes to a long-term sell, and just kind of positioning yourself as a recruiter, as a strategic partner who can consistently add value. That's going to be something that's really relevant and really interesting to a leadership team who wants to ensure that, one, yes, they're being as fast as possible and as efficient as possible, but that someone who they're bringing on board really aligns with the overall strategy and vision of the company as a whole. So I found this a little bit encouraging. Again, 56% isn't as high as I wish it was, but I think that this is something that, there's increasing amounts of attention and accountability, I think, around this, and around just kind of talent acquisition not existing in a vacuum and not existing on a department by department basis, but rather thinking of this a little bit more holistically. And I, for one, find that encouraging.
Yeah, I like it. I'm glad that it's finally happening. And yeah, it gets you out of, going to the recruiter after the fact and saying, oh, they're just a recruiter, they're gonna fill this role too. When you're that talent advisor, it's, well, let's look at your business strategy. What's your plan for the next year? Are you trying to maintain where you are? Are you trying to grow? Okay, cool. What are your different levers of growth? Is it a lot of like you need sales reps on the ground getting in front of people? Is it your marketing? Is it, you have a couple big customers, you just really need to nurture those relationships? Okay, cool. These are the types of roles. I've worked with a bunch of organizations like you. Here's what I see success with. Here's the skill set that they have. Here's what you should be thinking about for how to continue to help them improve and grow internally from an L&D standpoint. So when you are able to speak at that level, I think that's part of it. Is I don't know how many recruiters out there able to do this right now because they've been put in that bucket of, oh, they're just a recruiter. But when you can start to show that expertise and how you think, I think that's going to help open this number up even more over time, because I think some business leaders, they don't know that recruiters necessarily think like this all the time. So the more you do, the more you show that, that's how you get a seat at the table.
That's a really great point. I think that it is an unfortunate reality that the onus is on recruiters to almost reframe expectations around the value that they can provide. And especially when it comes to shifting to this mindset of talent advisory and overarching business strategy, I think that there are so many opportunities for that, but it does require a little bit of that growth mindset, go-getter type of mentality that I know is so innate to so many recruiters. And so I think finding ways to bring that expertise to the table and really showcase it. Again, it's that long-term strategy of, if you're willing to put in this work up front to position yourself this way, it makes your job so much easier moving forward, because there's no more of that tug of war of just kind of like, I know that this candidate is a great fit, but I'm getting resistance. Or I know that, this candidate would be perfect if we could just bump up the salary a little bit or whatever it may be. I think that those battles become a little bit easier to fight when you've bought that level of just respect and admiration and the assurance that, hey, this person gets what we're doing. They understand who we're trying to find. And if they say we need to do this, I trust them. Let's let them do their thing. And so, again, I do think it's unfortunate that for many companies and hiring organizations, that might not be the way that they view recruiters that they're working with or that they've worked with in the past. But I think that this is a really cool opportunity for those really driven, high performance recruiters to say, no, I'm not just a recruiter. If that's how you look at me, I'm a talent advisor and I am a strategic partner, and look at what I can do for you. And so, yeah, I think that this is really awesome. I do think that having that kind of like concierge approach to business strategy in general is really interesting. And I'm curious to see how recruiters take this over the next couple of years specifically and run with it, because I think it'll change the way the just public perception around recruitment in general and the ways that we view it. There's so much out there, different opinions and swirling around and all of that. But I think that there's a lot of opportunity to almost like rewrite that a little bit. And it's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Slight tangent on this that I was thinking about. I always think like I tie things back to like what I know and then how that ties to recruiting. You have marketing. We went through this the last like 5 years or so, where it was you have a company. It's like, oh, we need to get higher revenue targets. Let's go hire more sales reps. And what we did was we just like, whoa. Let's stop and look at everything that's coming from our company. You've got this funnel. All of our leads, all of our opportunities, and everyone thinks it's a one perfect blended funnel. But the reality is, if you go and look at like what sales brings in versus what marketing brings in, you can see it's like, oh, marketing is actually a lot more effective in bringing like people that actually become customers. And it's more cost effective to go put $50,000 into marketing than $150,000 into sales, if that was the equivalent that we need to get to that same number. So tying this over to recruiting, whenever you come up against an organization that's kind of stuck on this, they're like, I don't know about that cost. We can't afford you. We don't want to pay it. I would almost say like, let's have fun. Let's experiment. Let's put this to a test. You go about how you would hire for this role today. Go put your job posting up. Go do whatever it is that you're going to do. But let me do something with you all too. Let me work with your team to write like a proper job description. I'll do solely passive recruiting. You bring me your 5-10 best candidates, have them go through the process. I'll bring you my 5-10 best candidates. We'll have them go through the process. And at the end, you tell me what you think is worth it and how you think that they would or wouldn't fit in your organization over time. Like, I would love to see that happen.
I love
and
that.
I think it's fully
I want
real.
someone to do that experiment because I love that. And I would love to do a case study on this. So if anyone is interested in having this bold approach and taking this strategy to a hiring team, hit us up because I would love to follow along with your journey there.
And then have you on the podcast afterward to tell us how it went.
Exactly. Yeah, no, that's such an interesting, again, there's so much overlap between just kind of outputs across different functions of business. But I think that is a really, really compelling case for, again, the passive approach. In this case, really more so the inbound versus outbound approach. There is such a difference in terms of like quality of respondent, like we'll call them in a general term. And I think that this is, yes, super compelling to think about, okay, I am actively finding people rather than waiting for them to come to me. And inherently, from a quality perspective, that does imply some level of like an increase in quality. So I would love to, have someone conduct this experiment straightforward and just have it happen because I think it would be really enlightening.
Let's do it. All right. You heard it here first. Come find us.
Come find us. Okay, so with all of these stats in mind, I think we'll get into kind of almost like a perspective shifting moment, which is one of my favorite types of moments in general. And honestly, this was inspired by a comment on a LinkedIn post. Matt, our founder, he posted asking for like a call to action for stories about recruiters finding their Bigfoot. And it really yielded some interesting responses. And one that I found really compelling and interesting, I'll read just because I think that this is a powerful reframe and one that challenged me a little bit. So Maxwell Thomas says, interesting stuff. Sometimes finding Bigfoot is tricky, and other times it's right there in front of you. The perfect resume might not be a thing, but skills that transfer sure are. It takes a bit of creativity to truly back your candidate. I've seen teachers turn into awesome marketing analysts and 911 operators nail safety roles in manufacturing. Fascinating. Great response. Maxwell Thomas, thank you for contributing to the conversation, because I think that this is such a key point that I didn't even consider when thinking about the concept of like finding your Bigfoot. The idea of just kind of a more creative approach to looking at candidates, especially in a market where a lot of people are fleeing one role in search of almost like a fresh start. You do see this a lot with teachers in recent years. You see this with people in the medical profession a lot, increasingly nurses. There's just so much kind of happening, and things are getting shaken up. And so I think it presents this interesting opportunity for recruiters to be a little bit more creative and to kind of have this, again, more qualitative approach to what a Bigfoot candidate is. And I love, love, love this, because there are so many ways where, again, we've seen someone can check every box on paper, but does that mean that they're actually going to be an all-star top performer when they get in the role? Not necessarily. And so I think, I don't know, this is a really unique opportunity and challenge, in my opinion.
I love it. Yeah, the creativity side, and how he says, they could be there right in front of you the whole time. So, yeah, what I got from that is it's like, don't be so literal sometimes that you paint yourself into a box where it's like, I need to hire a software engineer. I'm going to go in and look for software engineers who work in Silicon Valley in these types of industries. Well, to his point, it's like, what did he say? He said he's seen teachers turn into awesome marketing analysts. It's like, yes, I fully agree with that, but you have to think about why. What are those skills that go in behind? It's like teachers have to be able to explain things very well, communicate them effectively. So whether you're a marketing analyst, marketing manager, someone, it's like that's the core of marketing, is how do you communicate a message effectively to the right people. So you have teachers like that. You have teachers that can go into even like training instructors in any way. Same type of thing. It's the concept of what's the core skill that they have. So I like that concept of, and I think there is a larger conversation going on right now, but it's like skills based hiring versus like previous specific jobs that they've had or anything else. It's widening that net and seeing like how can these be applicable, because sometimes it's like when you do get so siloed into that, you miss out on all the new fresh perspectives that a teacher might find, like, oh, this is a way more effective way to get people to learn and retain things, that a marketer is just like beat it into their head. It's like, no, there's better ways to get your message across, and like these people have understood it. Well, meanwhile, you and I are over here just like, how do we get the 10th email out to get people to finally buy? We don't do that, don't worry, y'all aren't going to be spammed. But it's that same concept, right?
Totally. And I think, yeah, like there's so many, when you start thinking creatively like this, there's so many easy overlaps. Like, yes, I can totally see teachers transitioning into a marketing type of role. I also see them, I've interacted with multiple former teachers who get into enablement. They're so good at making processes where they weren't typically being organized, having this patience around like creating processes that a lot of other people are just like so antsy to just figure out. And I think that, yeah, when you think about everything that a teacher does, all of that stuff feels so obvious. But if a teacher applies to your sales enablement role, you might be like, what is this person doing
Mm-hmm.
here? This isn't a good fit. And so I think that it makes things both easier and more challenging, because again, anytime you put more emphasis on that creativity, the qualitative, that becomes a little bit more, there's more human intervention involved, there's more human need involved. And I think that, again, this is an opportunity for recruiters to really differentiate themselves, those recruiters who are becoming increasingly afraid of AI and hearing these stories of organizations moving to using AI for sourcing and hiring and all of that. It's like, no, this is a really cool opportunity to differentiate yourself in the sense of, hey, I'm bringing something to the table that a computer could never. And that is a creative approach to hiring. There is so much that AI can do from an analytical perspective, but it simply can't be creative. Like, it requires human input for that. And I feel like that's something that gives me a lot of peace. And I think it can give recruiters a lot of peace as well. So I think, again, it's a challenge in the sense of it does require a little bit more work, and it does require more of that long-term strategic approach of, okay, candidates and matches, and trying to kind of think through, okay, I have this candidate who I interacted with 6 months ago. they might not be on paper the best fit for this, but based on the conversations I had with this person, I feel like I should reach out to them because this seems like they could add so much value, and I think it could be a good fit for them too. And yeah, just having that, again, long-term approach, relational approach, qualitative skills versus experience, all of that.
I love it. And I'm thinking, as you're talking about, it's the AI side and everything else. So even if you were to proactively, you like, I want to be creative with this. I want to get out of my own head where I can only think like, I need an engineer. I'm going to type an engineer. This is where you actually could use AI to your benefit sometimes. Like hop over to ChatGPT and say like, what are the top 10 professions for someone who needs to be able to communicate effectively and get people to follow orders or something? Like
Yeah.
teacher might be the first one, but it's going to give you other ideas. And that's where you can then go in and you can start looking at those roles, find the other skills that those people have, but also like you could find out, some of those industries are closing down. So a lot of people are transitioning out of those jobs. Like that could expand your pool a little bit. Again, if the industry expertise isn't as important as the skill that they bring and that mindset, it's like that could actually be a really interesting way to think about how do you widen that talent pool.
I really like that. And again, it goes back to the idea of really determining what does an A player / Bigfoot / purple squirrel look like for this role. And I think that when you're able to do that, it does allow for so much more creativity. I think a lot of times people think when I create structure and when I really like map things out, it almost limits my ability to be creative. And I think that it's actually the opposite. There's so much opportunity. Once you define what am I looking for with specificity, you can then take that and be so creative within the bounds of it. And I think that that's where creativity is at its best. And so I think in this case, yes, being overly creative and overly relational and saying, oh, like, I really like this guy. And, yeah, he formerly was an electrician, but I think he could knock it out of the park in this software engineer role. He'll learn. Maybe that's not the best way to think about it. But so it's like taking all of this with a grain of salt and being truly strategic requires a mix of both. And that balance is tricky to find, but when you do find it, it's such a sweet spot and so much good stuff happens in that zone. So I would encourage recruiters, again, like there is so much back end strategy and alignment that has to happen between recruiters and hiring teams to determine, okay, what is the ideal candidate? What are we looking for? And how much leeway do we have in each of these specific areas? Because there are Bigfoot candidates out there hiding in a database, hiding, they're not hiding. They're just waiting for you to reach out to them. And I think that, yeah, there's a lot more opportunity, to your point, based on the technology that we have and the resources that we have now to make that stuff happen in ways that we just simply couldn't 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm. I love it. I can't think of a better way to wrap the episode than on that note right there. So I love this conversation. This was a blast. We've had so much fun ideas too. I can't wait to start getting some of our ad libs out and play. I can't wait for people to start running these tests and everything else. So keep us posted, everyone, as you go through
Seriously,
these.
if anyone is interested in doing some experimentation and wants to just like talk through what that could look like a little bit more and just kind of pick our brains, we can pick yours and help figure out what something like that could look like. We would love to partner with you in that. And I think it could be a really interesting experiment that could help a lot of us who are listening. So dead serious. If anyone is interested in trying something bold, we are here for it and we're here to support you in that.
I love it. All right. Well, Lex, thank you as always hey, you didn't disappoint. We said this was going to be a fun conversation. I don't think it left a single person fun. We probably hit the full pendulum of emotions between
I
when
think
I threw
we
your
did.
laptop
Yeah, it
out
was
the
fun.
window,
It was
have some
frustrating.
laughs.
It was a little bit of
Yeah.
everything. And what more
All the
could you
good stuff.
want in a podcast episode, right?
Yeah, exactly. It was like a good soap opera. We'll take it. All right. Well, as we wrap, Becoming a Hiring Machine is a production of Loxo. If you like this episode, but you're not sure where to go next, we've got a link in the show notes to a similar episode, which you can find those in the description of your favorite podcast streaming platform, plus on our website. Full video episodes are available on YouTube as well if you prefer to listen while you watch. And if you have a specific question, you're looking for advice, send that over to us, podcast@loxo.co. So, all right, everyone, that was the show. That was yet another fun trending topics with Lex. Until next time, bye, y'all.